Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with yet another Tim May podcast, coming to you from deep in my bunker. Actually, my little, what do you call it? My wife calls it my trash heap, but in fact, I call it my office here at my home, somewhere outside of Columbus, Ohio. And joining me today, somewhere from outside of Detroit, Michigan, is my good friend and Michigan beat writer for these many years, even though she still looks like she's 18, Angelique Chengelis. Angelique, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Tim, thanks for having me on this podcast. It's, it's been a technical feat to have both of us hook up here.
I think the word you were looking there is adventure. And the word
yes, it was.
The book I would use to best describe it was the one written about Teddy Roosevelt, The River of Doubt, because I was doubting whether or not this was actually going to take place, because obviously, from your end, everything was great, but from my end, there were a lot of dangling wires that had to be connected, and I kept shocking myself. So here I am, Angelique.
I'm glad you're there.
Well, by the way, what are you doing? How are you spending time? Have you guys gotten into the furlough thing yet? I mean, how are operations going with you and the Detroit News?
Well, to be very honest, Tim, I feel like I'm busier than ever. I just have these days where I'm getting everybody's home. So all these people you call, and they usually take a couple days to get back to you, they're calling back instantly. And so I keep getting backed up with interviews, and I've got all this transcribing to do. And so that's been good. I mean, I've been finding stories and have some more planned this week. But yes, we will start having furloughs this week. I believe they actually started last week. Mine's not for a few weeks, though. So, it is what it is. Better than not having a job, I guess.
Yeah, furlough has a whole different connotation than it did back when you were in the, not you, but back when you were in the armed services. They go, you're going on a 2-week furlough, which meant you got 2 weeks in Japan or Berlin or something, paid, by the way. Yeah, and I think y'all are owned by the same company as the Columbus Dispatch, my former employer, right? I mean, they've instituted that. Gatehouse has instituted that nationwide, right? I mean, people are rolling into furloughs.
Yeah, no, it's for the next 3 months, I believe. So,
yeah.
I think the weeks are going by so fast. I mean, people don't even know what day it is. So it feels like, I think a couple of people we know went on had their furlough last week, and then boom, they're back. So
yeah.
The days are just really blending. They're very long, and I'm cooking a lot, freezing a lot of food, and have my mother here. So that's always interesting.
Unlimited baklava. How much better could it get?
Yeah, that's true. I know. I owe you some.
Please check your blood sugar every day, though. Make sure you're okay. But
Right.
yeah, this is an interesting time. By the way, today is the first day of the rest of your life, hopefully. So that's where we are. That's where we are on the calendar. I just want to get into it. Ohio State, as you well know, well, maybe you don't know, Ohio State, like several weeks ago, in essence, Gene Smith and the powers that be said the football team is in limbo from the standpoint of the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, for want of another term, is padlocked. They're not allowed to be in there working out, et cetera. The coaches are all at home. They did a big sanitation of the Woody Hayes Athletic Center before they closed it, and they've been told to stay home. The players shelter in place is not the correct term, but hang out in place is more the correct term. Coaches the same way. Whether May 1 there will be a change in the guard, May 15, June 1, that's yet to be decided, because you can't open the football facility until you've opened up really the school and told everybody can come back to school or come back to your jobs, because nobody congregates more than a football team from the standpoint of number of people, et cetera. I'm just wondering what precautions, what strategies has Michigan taken during this COVID-19 situation?
Very comparable, Tim. I mean, all the coaches, everybody's out of Schembechler Hall. They've done the same there, cleaning, getting it prepared, for the eventual return, which who knows when that's going to be, hopefully sooner than later. But I did talk to quite a few of the players are home. They've become very inventive, and I'm sure every college player around the country has become inventive in terms of staying in shape and finding ways to weight train and condition. And Caden Colasar, whose father, John Colasar, they live in the Cleveland area. he got home and he needed to work out. He found a full propane tank in his garage and started doing lifts with it, and then put it behind his back and started doing lunges. So, and he said he feels like he's in fantastic shape right now.
Yeah.
So doing thing, some guys have full gyms at their homes, but not many. So there's been a lot of that, and they have to send photos of, every day the coaches give them some kind of challenge. I think every day they have to send in a picture of their made bed. That's a big deal. You have to make your bed, get up and get going. And the same with nutrition. They have to send photos of what they're eating to the nutritionist, and she's making recommendations. Aiden Hutchinson said he sent in some photos and he didn't have enough green on his plate. So she's like, you need to get some spinach, some food. But these guys are eating like 8 or 9 eggs in the morning, Tim. And I'm like, how are you? I mean, they're used to having their training table at this point. So now they have to cook for themselves. So, but they're also doing like this, like what we're doing with the coaches, position coaches, going over the playbook and trying to act like it's still spring football, and because Michigan would have been having its open practice on Saturday, so they would have been in the midst of it.
Yeah, Ohio State would have had its spring game this past weekend, and that's one of the more highly attended games in the country.
Yeah, I've been to it a few times.
And
it's amazing.
People are looking forward to seeing that battle for the backup quarterback position, for example, and all these other, who's going to play in the secondary and all that's gone out to the side. I mean, like you were talking about Michigan, though, Ohio State got into really quickly getting into like the nutrition aspect of things with their players. They've actually shipped packets of like foods, et cetera, to the players who need them, to keep them on a certain type of diet. They've sent some of them rubber, those big exercise bands, BANDS, to help them, because, different people are in different places as this goes. Some are in a country home, like Cade Stover grew up on a farm, yet you got people living in the middle of a city. They can't necessarily just go out and start running down the street, et cetera. They've come up with all kinds of different plans for these guys. And like you said, I think they meet almost daily via Skype, Zoom, like we're on today, different kind of meetings to keep going. It's really been interesting because, these football coaches are making lots of money. Even Ohio State's now got 4 assistant coaches are going to be making over $1 million a year, including one Michigan reject, Greg Madison. No, I'm just joking. But and Al Washington's getting on up there too. But I mean, these guys are trying to earn their money, as you well know, and of course the head coaches, they're just rolling. This is a really interesting exercise, as I've equated it. It's kind of like getting ready for D-Day. As far as the Allied forces were concerned, I mean, I would never equate it to war in that regard, but except you have no idea when D-Day is going to come. I mean, when everybody's going to get the all clear signal to recongregate and get back to business. But I'm sure they've run over, these guys are running over all kinds of contingency plans about when it goes. And, as Ryan Day said, I've been saying this for like many weeks now, you're going to have to give these teams 5 or 6 weeks of preseason camp, almost like an NFL camp, I think, to get their acts back together, because Michigan missed almost all of its spring, right?
Yes.
Ohio State only got 3 spring practices in, and we can go, well, who cares? I mean, those are so vital for these teams anymore. I mean, Ohio State treats their preseason camp as the beginning, or their spring camp as the beginning, really, of their preseason camp, part of the number of practices leading up to opening day. And I'm sure Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, they do a similar thing, right?
Well, they do. And my thing, though, is I talked to a couple of these guys about extending the preseason camp, whenever that may be. And they're like, look, our bodies are already exhausted after the 3 weeks of camp. They don't know that they could handle a few more weeks of it. And so I don't know how they're going to do that. If we get to that point where college football starts, whenever it starts, Tim, all these theories are being talked about. I keep thinking, well, maybe they scrap the non-conference and just start with a Big Ten conference. But I think you still need to have maybe an exhibition game or something. Maybe you get a Michigan and Notre Dame to have an exhibition game just to get the rust off. Ohio State plays Cincinnati, get back into the flow of game speed as much as you can, with this layoff. I mean, you're right. Michigan only had not started spring ball. Ohio State had. You look at a school like Arizona State, they got half of their spring practices in. So they're both teams are behind, and it will be interesting. You know, I hope that this is a debate that they have pretty soon. I mean, we all hope that college football comes back, but certainly not before everyone feels safe. And how they're going to handle it, you know, again, the scenarios, no fans, you know, however it's going to go. But in terms of getting these teams ready, it's going to be interesting. But there's also this sense that these guys are going to be fresher. You know, their bodies aren't going to be beaten up. They're going to have time to rest. But you're right, at Michigan, I mean, this was going to be a big spring for Dylan McCaffrey and Joe Milton. So, you know, how does that play out now? So that'll be really, I think, really interesting to see how this is going to work out.
Yeah, you know, and I think the reason most people are looking at a 5 or 6, maybe a 6-week window there of preseason camp is because, like you were just talking about, John Coles, I mean, the Colestar thing, they can't afford a weight set, evidently. I mean, he's working out with propane and propane accessories. You know, Mickey Marotti is the football performance coordinator for Ohio State. I figure he's more anxious than almost anyone because you have such both of these programs have such ridiculously regimented ways of keeping their guys in shape, honed to a certain extent through the off season, through spring, and it's not really off season, you wouldn't call it, but I mean through that interim between spring and the beginning of camp, where these guys are working out all the time together. There's a program that they follow religiously of getting guys bigger, faster, stronger, and you know you can always think you can send in videos, et cetera, that you're working out. But, you know, if you're working out with rubber bands instead of a weight machine, or if you're working out with propane and propane accessories instead of dead weights, et cetera, I mean, lifting real weights, I mean, that's why they're going to be skeptical about what kind of shape they're in, even though the players, I'm sure, are going, hey, I feel fresher I've ever been. Yeah, because you're probably not working anywhere near as hard as you have been working in the past in the winters. So, you know, you know this better than anybody, how paranoid head coaches can be and football coaches can be. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe I'm putting one foot in
Yes, I do.
But you know what, you deal with that on a constant basis. So that's why you're looking at that. But I agree. I mean, I wrote a story for LettermenRow.com here where I could see everybody just saying, okay, the Big Ten, you got 14 members. Come up with a 10-game season intramural, you know. And what I didn't put in there is what I also forgot to put in there. All of your rivals, y'all play. You know, Ohio State plays Michigan. Michigan State plays Penn State, even though it's not really a rivalry, but hey, it's tough luck. You know, but all the rivalry games are set, but then the other 9 are just drawn by computer. And that's your season this year. Brigham Young and Notre Dame, hey, you're in the Big 12 this year, you know, so they can have 12 members actually. And you could have a 10-game season. You take the champions of those 5 power conferences, you put them into the playoffs along with 3 at-larges from maybe deserving teams from those Power 5s or a team, you know, from the lesser Power 5. What would you call that? The medium Power 5. And I forgot what the name of that. What do they call those poor guys? What do they call those other 5 conferences? I forgot. But anyway, you put. Yeah.
I'm sticking with yours. That's good.
I think the lesser 5. There we go. And then, you know, you have your 8-team playoff like everybody wants just for this 1 year. Give everybody a little bonus. And those first 4 games would be played at a campus site. And then the semis and finals would go where they're proposed, but maybe a month or 2 later. And that's, you know, the great thing about dome stadiums is you can play all through the year. But I think that's what you've got to look at, those kind of contingencies, because we don't know when the green light's going to go on, when the all clear siren's going to be sounded. And like I said, you can't do football until you've decided it's okay for everybody to be back together, because football is the most mingling of sports that there is. Well, agreed?
I think you're absolutely right, and I think you've solved it all, Tim. I mean, I think we're done here. All your work is. I think you've got
my work is done.
The Big Ten commissioner and tell him all this.
Well, I know. I'm sort of humble, though. I have a lot of humility about myself. I don't want to establish myself as the Khazar. Is that how you pronounce it? Khazar? Khazar?
How are you staying in shape during this?
You know what? Seriously, Angelique, before we get into what I really want to talk about with you, I've never been in better shape than I am right now. I mean, in my whole life, and I'm not going to get into why, but I mean, I got into, doing a little dumbbell lifting, all that kind of stuff a long time ago, and have progressed, where every time I'm supposed to get a gift, I ask for like another set of dumbbells that are bigger than the ones before. My wife looks skeptically at me, but I've never hit a softball, a golf ball farther than I hit them now. They don't always go straight, but even I have to go venture deeper into the woods to find them. You know what I mean? And things like that. I mean, I have a little hacksaw I carry with me, but yeah, it's, you can do with what you want to do during this time. If I was like living with you and your husband and your mom, I would be in the worst shape of all because I'd be eating baklava every day and some type of Greek pasta or Greek salads at night. How would you keep me in shape? What would be going on there?
Well, I've been doing a lot of cooking. I mean, I've been very creative. I just, my cousin said it's like having, what's the cooking show, Chopped? Every night
Chopped.
you find stuff in your freezer and you make things. And it's still Lent for the Greek church. Easter's on Sunday, so I'm still fasting, and so no meat, and I have to come up with these, no meat recipes. I'm being very creative. I'll just leave it at that. And I think
you just gave me a bad memory, and has nothing to do with you. But the Greek Orthodox Church, that's where my son and my daughter-in-law got married, and they baptized my little grandson Owen about several months ago, and I'm telling you what, that shouldn't happen to a little kid, man. He got dunked 3 times. Are you kidding me? He doesn't even know what's going on except he's screaming. But hey, boy, if I get into that conversation, we'll be here all day, and I will have a lot of people hanging up on me. So I won't get into that, okay?
Okay.
But I felt so sorry for and by the way, he's here today. He's in another room. We've been babysitting while his mom and my son Kyle work from home, and we've been a godsend for them, and it's been a blessing for me because I'm getting to babysit my grandson Owen, and he's so cute. You've seen him.
He's adorable.
Yeah,
he's adorable.
He's a good little boy too, man. I swear to goodness. A year and 3 months old. But hey, I'm not bragging, and I digress. What are we going to do? What's going to happen with the greatest rivalry in sport, Angelique? Since 2001, when Jim Trussell made good on his proclamation, I wouldn't call it a promise. He just said everybody'd be proud of him when they went to Ann Arbor that year. Michigan's only won 2 games in the storied series, 2 out of the last 20. Everybody wanted to give it up for dead up through 2000 when Ohio State was 2-10-1 in the series. Now this has flipped so much the other way. It's really ridiculous. Even probably Harbaugh's best team in 2016, I think it was, couldn't get it done. The year of the spot, which is now another blemish on the Michigan record. That was pretty funny what I just said. What's to come of the greatest rivalry in sport?
Well, I know people say, well, is it still a rivalry when one team is dominated? And, we've talked about the 2-10-1, the Cooper era. It was a rivalry. I mean, Ohio State, those were some great Ohio State teams.
Yeah.
And, Michigan got the better of them in that how many games? I don't want to do the math.
13.
Stretch.
13.
But yeah, I mean, I've thought about this a lot, Tim. I mean, let's go back and it's what ifs. It's a lot of what ifs. And 2016, what if JT's short? Michigan gets that win, and who knows what happens then? What if they have a different quarterback the next year? They have a pretty good game plan, I thought, in 17, and they had a 14-0 lead, I believe Michigan did. And, it just it slipped away, obviously. But I think if you have a good quarterback in that situation, maybe they get that win. So, I play that what if game. What if Michigan wins those 2 games? Then maybe you don't have these conversations that we've all started having, like, how big's the gap, the recruiting gap. And I'm of the opinion it's not enormous. And then I think that follows, and then I think it's coaching. And maybe it is. I think it's, I think talent is there at Michigan. It's not as many. There's not as many 5 stars. It's not like that. I don't want to compare the stars and all that because that's not comparable. But I think there is a lot of talent at Michigan, and I just wonder if they're getting everything they can out of these guys. And I remember I went back and looked at stories from the Cooper run, Michigan's run against Michigan, and it was a lot. I mean, Michigan's run against Ohio State. Pardon me. And I remember reading like Marcus Ray saying, "We're in their heads. We're in their heads."
Right.
And I think you can say that now very safely.
Yeah.
That Ohio State's in Michigan's heads, and maybe they just don't. They get tight. They don't know how to. These guys don't know how to
Finish.
They can win and finish.
Yeah, finish is the word you're looking for there. It kind of reminds me of that Jerry Seinfeld episode about the car reservations. Rental car. Anyone can take a reservation. It's the holding, it's the keeping it, keeping the lead that has been Michigan's problem. And you grew up in Ohio, Cincinnati. I grew up in Alabama and Texas before I moved up here. I did go to the Ohio State University. Didn't get a sheepskin, but I got a sheep. What do you call it? A wolf in sheep's clothing. But anyway, the bottom line is, everybody looks at these games. This isn't like basketball where you sometimes get 2 shots a year at a team, or baseball, the major leagues where you get 14, 16, 18 shots at a team or 20 shots at a team, depending on, I don't even know what they play anymore. I don't hardly ever pay attention to baseball. The fact that baseball's not playing right now hasn't even crossed my mind.
Same here.
Spring football is what I missed, but they look at these games as referendums, and I mean, these once a year games. And that's why even in the Cooper years, there were some great games that just turned on a play or 2 plays. And just like you just pointed out, I mean, the spot back in 2016, or Tyvis Powell's interception when Michigan decided to go for 2. And what was that, 2013 at Michigan Stadium? Well, maybe I got it wrong. But
no. Brady Hope, Devin Gardner, broken foot. He's playing on a broken foot. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, they just turned on a player to even in 2011 when Ohio there with Luke Fickell as the interim head coach. That game turned on a couple of plays in the second half, and that's all it is. That's the difference between them. It's not like you're comparing navies where you've got 44 battleships, the other team's got 6. Now, with that said, the computer rankings, in my opinion, don't lie, and Ohio State clearly has gotten many more 4 and 5 stars in its ranks than Michigan has right now, and has had that advantage for quite a few years now. And I do think in the big games, those sometimes give you that little edge that makes the difference. And it's interesting because when you look at recruiting rankings, and this year, it's 2021. Class. I mean, Ohio State's like ranked number 1 or number 2 where you want to look. The head start they've gotten on most people is crazy. It's even had a momentum through this dead period, which is kind of like a misnomer. But and Michigan's been trying to play catch up in the recruiting for a while now. And I really do believe that's where I've been sort of like surprised that Michigan hasn't gotten back to that upper echelon of recruiting, at least according to the recruiting rankings and the 4 and 5 stars.
Well, I think the other thing that perplexes me, Tim, is that then you go to the NFL Combine and you look at the numbers that they have at the Combine, Michigan, and the last couple of years they've had a lot of players there. Yes. And even at the Senior Bowl, I think they had more players than anybody. Maybe Michigan and Ohio State had the same. I can't remember exactly. But
wait a minute, interrupt you. But that's because all these Ohio State guys, the stars, are leaving early before they're seniors.
True.
I'm
right. No,
but I'm sort of true.
It is sort of true.
Yeah.
But so I mean, that's why I keep thinking the talent is there. I mean, I at Michigan, and I mean, look at what D'Antonio did at Michigan State with 3 stars and maybe even fewer stars than that. And so it's about getting everything you can out of them and getting this focus. And I will say, Tim, what I think, and sometimes I think leadership was lacking at times. at Michigan this last year. I think this younger group of players, at least in the conversations I've had, there's a different focus. And I mean, I get this sense that they understand that a gap needs to be not closed, because it's going to take a while to close it, but to just narrow it a little bit. And I just get the sense there's a different level of leadership coming up. And I think, people talk about that, and, it's hard to describe it, but I just felt like it was missing this past year, maybe even the year before that a little bit.
Yeah. I
think they're getting it back. But look, you're right. I grew up in Ohio. I love this rivalry. It's one of the reasons why I keep working, because I live for that week. I mean, we've talked about that, how much fun the Michigan-Ohio State week is. And even when, coming off a 62-39 loss, it still felt festive and fun, and it's back. So, yeah. Maybe I'm not the right person, because I still think it's a rivalry, even though it's swung one way. And just because I love everything about it. But that's not enough for Michigan fans, certainly. And they need to see something. I mean, you go back to that 62-39 game in Columbus, I think anybody would say 39 points should have been enough to win.
Oh, yeah.
Game, right?
Yeah. Well, it's almost come down to Michigan hasn't been able to make the plays defensively that make the difference. I mean, that's right. If there's all kinds of ways you can dissect the game all kinds of different ways. 62-39, middle of the third quarter, that game's in doubt, and then all of a sudden, boom. And what looks more, that's what I posed that question to people for a while there. I said, on the one hand, you can say Ohio State scored 62 points against Michigan, the most they'd ever scored against Michigan. On the other hand, they gave up 39. Is that something to hang your hat on? I mean, and it was sort of a harbinger of like a sort of a defensive problem that Ohio State got figured out finally last year, in the first year under Ryan Day. When, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. But you're right. I mean, I don't look at these as one-game referendums on where the programs are. I think Michigan's programs, if you took Ohio State out of the equation, the program would look pretty stout right now for the most part. And so would Penn State's for the most part. Michigan State was Ohio State's bugaboo for a while there. We'll see how they do under Mel Tucker. Mel Tucker's one of my favorite guys I've ever covered at Ohio State. Sharp guy, great recruiter. We'll see where he goes. I mean, obviously that program was in upheaval there, and we'll see what happens in the next several months or next couple of years, because, D'Antonio just all of a sudden deciding to retire was extremely interesting. So we'll see where that goes. But, it's the Big Ten East is a hard place to kind of, get a new grip on things. The great place to be is go west, young man, because that's where if you get a couple of recruiting classes in the West Division of the Big Ten, that's where you can make hay quickly. You agree with me on that, don't you?
Oh, for sure. I mean, if I could decide to go in one division, I'd definitely go west. But I mean, you mentioned Mel Tucker and Michigan State. I mean, first of all, the timing of the hire. I mean, it wasn't his fault when he got hired, but the timing of D'Antonio's departure, and then this hits. And I mean, talk about recruiting. How hard that must be for Michigan State having this. And they're trying to make up ground, and they can't get out to see these kids, and they're trying to make connections to bring a new class into Michigan State. I feel bad for them. I mean, that was tough timing for Mel Tucker, but I think you're right. From all accounts, he's a terrific recruiter, and we'll see what he does there, obviously. But what a tough. I mean, he was really behind it there, and not by nothing he did.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
But he wanted to get back to the Big Ten. I mean, it's interesting. Colorado, that's a great place to probably live, but it's in the hinterlands when it comes to recruiting, although he did a great job there one year was, the year he was there. But he will make inroads. I mean, he's from Ohio. I mean, he knows the Cleveland area extremely well. He's a personable dude. Like I said, he's got a really interesting resume when you look at it, from working at Ohio State, to working for Nick Saban at Alabama, to going to Georgia, but also in the interim there, he went to the NFL with the Cleveland Browns and Jacksonville. He was the interim head coach there with the Jacksonville Jaguars for for half of a year, part of a year, and I think it was 2011. So, he's got a very interesting resume. And like I said, he's one of my favorite guys to ever just sit down and shoot the, almost said a bad word there, shoot the bull with. And by the way, while you were talking about that, about the West, I kept thinking about that Michigan fight song, Champions of the West. That would be real apropos. But then you still got to beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. So there you go, right?
Yeah, now that we're trying to figure out everything that happens in the Big Ten, I still think they have to fix the schedule so that Michigan doesn't have Michigan State and Ohio State at home one year and then on the road both. Michigan State has Ohio State and Michigan at home and then on the road. They got to divide that just for fans to be able to see one of the rivalries at home each year, not both of them.
Don't step on tradition, Angelique. Don't step on tradition.
No, I mean, I'm just saying flip-flop the State game at home and then Ohio State on the road and then flip-flop.
Well, as Ohio State's even finding, has found out the last several years, when you only have one premier game at home like Wisconsin or Penn State, you're still trying to sell tickets to Ohio State versus Rutgers, and the fans now, the fans are quite discerning now on what they will and won't put money into, and that was a challenge major college football was already facing before this COVID-19 thing. And that's why I proposed, that whole deal about, when they come back, the Power Fives just play an intramural conference schedule this one year to get you through this. But then every game you play, every game matters, as we well know in major college football, but every game you play, and it's all conference, will matter, and we'll see if in fact they adopt anything like that, because I saw another proposal that says somebody wrote back to me and said, well, you play 9 conference games and 1 intersectional game that you could come up with. And so, if Ohio State, got matched with like Florida or Alabama or, or Texas or somebody, you could have these marquee games if they wanted to do it right. Because the big thing is there's a good chance you could have the NHL, the NBA, the NFL, major college football all playing at the same time in September. What do you think about that?
Well, and racing and everything. It's the Masters. It's crazy how the last part of this year could be. And look, I think I would rather have that than nothing, to be honest, but it would be very crazy. I think someone, I was looking around, said the Masters, when they were scheduled it's a really crummy weekend in college football. There were some really just matchups. So I don't know if that was...
Well, right now that's the case, but you're exactly right.
Right. Yeah. That is right now. So I don't know.
I think that's usually the weekend when Alabama plays like Furman or somebody.
Right. No, I think you're right. I think that's it. I think Michigan plays Rutgers or something.
Yeah.
No offense to Rutgers.
Yeah.
Just a little.
Well, Greg Schiano's back there. We'll see what happens there. But that's what they need. They needed to get back to their roots, and they did. And of course he had kind of a bittersweet departure from Ohio State, which is because I like Greg. But you're right. I mean, we could just have a jam packed, and then now, everybody thinks that could be a blessing, but the curse could be if you're a sponsor. Where do you buy time? It's a lot of businesses are just going to be possibly coming back into any kind of shape, et cetera. So, 2020, as I wrote in my little story I wrote about, 2020 usually means really nice, good, normal vision. And there is no normal vision right now. Everything's muddled on what's coming. You can't see until the COVID-19 decides to take a major departure. You can't see what's coming. Let me ask you one quick thing. We'll get out of here. What does your crystal ball say about you've got a husband who's in the medical profession. What is y'all's little home crystal ball saying about when this thing might be over? Not over, but.
I've talked to some other physicians. Chris Hutchinson, whose son Aiden is on this Michigan team, and Chris was on the first team I covered at Michigan. So, like you, I've covered fathers and now sons playing college football, which is crazy. But, he kept saying, and this was a few weeks ago, he kept saying it's going to get worse before it gets better, worse before it gets better. And I think now this is the worst. And, when you look at some of these models and talk to my sister who's a physician, I think that they think that it may be July. By July, early July, things are going to be settling down a bit. And again, these are just using these models and the projections, Tim. So, no one, then they're not all authorities, but I think that there's a sense that people are being smart, staying home, and maybe by July we get some sense of normalcy, and that's what I'm hoping for. I mean, I'm hanging on that, and I hope that maybe August is too early, September too early to play football and get back into it. But I was reading Gene Smith's comments the other day. I guess he had a conference call with Ohio State beat writers and how are they going to have football if there's no students on campus? So
right.
I think these dominoes have to fall. But
let me interrupt you. But his point there too is, how can you have football? How can you practice football and meet for football if, in fact, the sign hasn't been given that students can be back within proximity? I mean, his point is it's all about the health question. It has nothing to do with a clamor, because, a lot of fans would want football back now. But the point is it has to be a healthy situation for coaches and players and support personnel. I mean, these armies that are college football teams, for them to be back together.
Right. Yeah, no, all these dominoes have to fall into place for us to get what we want, which is college football, and certainly not trying to be selfish about that or flip. I mean, look, the safety of all these citizens in this country, that's way more important than any kind of football sporting event. But if we're talking about, what the models show, I mean, I think then people look at what's going on in Asia and Italy and looking for signs there. So I think at best it's hopeful that July would be maybe a return to some sense of normalcy.
Yeah. Can you imagine if people are quarantined, self-quarantined? I mean, you can already feel the anxiety and then also the eagerness to get back, to even being able to just hang out with people, much less go back to work and stuff. And we're only like 3 or 4 weeks into this. There's at least another month for sure, I would think. But can you just imagine? I mean, it's pretty much, like Kevin Bacon, trying to keep people all as well, hold them back and stuff. It's in Animal House. It's not, eventually it's going to become almost like a stampede kind of thing to try to get back to something. And who knows where that's going to lead us. But, Soylent Green is people. I mean, I keep thinking about that old movie from a long time ago, but there's all these kind of like scenarios you're playing out in your head of what things will be like 2 months from now. Will things be better, or will things be decidedly worse? I mean, no one has that crystal ball. But if everybody keeps doing what they're doing right now, I think the numbers are showing that there is a little bit of a flattening, so to speak. Flattening has nothing to do with going down. It just has to do with flattening. And so I'm talking about the curve, as everybody knows. But you're right. I mean, July is looking like a good time out there to kind of project, and we'll see where it goes. One last thing. What is your go-to snack in quarantine? Quarantine's not the right word, but you know what I'm saying. I can't think of another word better than that. What is your go-to snack that's both nutritious and delicious?
Peanut butter. I love peanut butter. I haven't had peanut butter in the house for a while, but since it's been Lent and I gave up sweets like an idiot, I got pretzels filled with peanut butter and peanut butter. So that's my go-to.
Big difference between peanut butter and pretzels filled with peanut butter, as you well know. Mine's mixed nuts. And then I've got this bar, this dark chocolate covered nut bar that I found at Costco about 6 months ago that is incredibly good. and according to the label, it's not that bad for you. Of course, when you eat 3 in a row, it probably is.
Right. Well, let me remind you, you are the only person, baklava, which my mother, I think she makes great baklava. I've never seen anybody eat so much in one sitting. I think you had 7 pieces that one time. It was incredible.
But see, I live in what's called a baklava desert. My wife doesn't make baklava. You've got a ghost behind you, by the way, looking over your shoulder. Oh my goodness.
It's Roger Federer.
I know. That scared me. That's the first time you'd moved, and I thought maybe David was there saying, "Hey, wrap it up, damn it! I've got a medical conference to get on." Yeah, Roger Federer, he looks pretty good. By the way, have you ever seen that show about the Hotel Carlisle in New York City? I downloaded that documentary about all these
Ghosts?
VIPs, et cetera, that go to this old time hotel, and he has a suite there every year when he plays in the U.S. Open. They know him. They know the snacks he loves. Speaking of snacks, by the way, I would highly recommend it. I think you can get it on Netflix, or you can get it on, I think, DirecTV. I downloaded it by DirecTV, but it's a documentary and it's excellent. But I digress. I don't even know what we're talking about. I'm just going to end this now. But yeah. But anyway, yeah, my snack, like I told you, my snacks, and yeah, you just got to be like everything is moderation right now. But when you're bouncing off the walls, the great thing is I'm chasing my little grandson around because he started walking about a month and 2 months ago, and so he's into everything. And I can't even imagine people trying to work at home and at the same time babysit their 1 to 2 year old. That must be crazy.
You're just using that as an excuse so you can have your grandson. You're like telling your son, you don't need the baby around. We'll take him.
Yeah, I'll never forget when I got that call. My son said, "Dad, we're having a lot of trouble. Do you think you and Mom could?" And I went, "Yes," like that. And Roger Federer agrees with me 100%. Angelique, thank you for coming on with me. And
thank you. I appreciate
we're going to do this again. We're going to do this again in the next several months leading into the season, because our little podcast we had going into the season, I don't think that was my first official one with LettermenRow.com, but it was extremely well watched, because whenever you're talking about the greatest rivalry, in sports, people are interested, or the greatest rivalry, parentheses, still, close parentheses, in sports. People are interested in knowing both sides of it, especially the other side, because everybody's always looking for information from across the border. But thank you for coming on with me, Angelique.
My pleasure, Tim. I look forward to it. I wish we had more concrete things to talk about in terms of the rivalry.
Yeah.
But one of these days, hopefully.
Yeah. 2-18 pretty well sums it up, I think. You can't be more succinct than that, correct?
Oh my gosh. No, but
hey, what goes around,
right?
What goes around comes around. What goes around comes around.
We're gonna come up with all the cliches now.
But I've seen it. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. You have too in your lifetime of covering Ohio State, Michigan. We've seen what goes around comes around. This has been a real long circumvention, or for want of another term, by Michigan to make it come around again. Kind of like going around Cape Horn, or whatever that cape is down South America, instead of going through the Panama Canal. I don't think they realize there's a Panama Canal, but we'll see. But anyway, until next time, Angelique, thank you very much. I'm going to be having Boston, him as Austin Ward, on here in a minute. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about Ohio State. But Angelique, thanks for coming on with me.
All right, stay safe, Tim, and I hope all your readers and viewers stay safe also.
Thank you very much, and likewise, ditto. And as promised, we're back with Boston. You know him as Austin Ward, my cohort at LettermenRow.com, one of the founding fathers of LettermenRow.com. And, Boston, you heard some of what Angelique Chengelis had to say. She's been covering Michigan football for a long time. And, this whole 2-18 drought that Michigan's been enduring in the game, the greatest rivalry, parentheses, question mark, close parentheses, in sport. Basically, she doesn't believe there's as big a talent gap as most people like to believe in that situation. It has come down to a play or two in many of the games over the last several years. You agree with that. The spot, the Tyvis Powell interception on the 2-point conversion play, things like that. But I don't know, where do you stand on the argument that there's not a big talent gap between Ohio State, which is among the elite recruiting programs in the country the last many years, and Michigan?
Yeah, I think, those two examples that you cited that have happened since I've been covering this rivalry, I think in 2013, when it came down to the 2-point conversion in Tyvis Powell, that was, there were clear and obvious deficiencies for Ohio State on defense, and Michigan put together a great game plan to turn that into a shootout when it probably shouldn't have been. I think that if you look at it, was probably the best coached game since 2012 by a Michigan coach. And
who was that coach again? His name was Brady Hoke. Is that right?
And I never thought I would give him any credit, but if you're looking at the big picture, that particular game and the game plan that they had, at least offensively, was one of the best, I think, of the series. And every other time, when you talk about 16, that was undoubtedly the most talented Michigan team. That was the closest on the field that you had in terms of personnel. And I thought really, I'm not going out on a limb here, a squandered opportunity by Michigan to really steal one and maybe turn the tide. But if you're looking at 17, 18, 19 since then, it's gone the other way. And Ohio State's talent has gone here and Michigan's is here. I don't think there's a question about that. And the easiest way, when that was all being discussed and I was, maybe champing at the bit to get in here, if it's not talent, what is it? What's causing the problem for Michigan? I think it is the talent because if you took that game last year, tell me one position unit where Ohio State would trade the players they had for the guys on Michigan's roster. I do not believe that there is one. The only place that you could maybe make an argument that there's a trade that could have helped out would be if Ohio State could have borrowed a linebacker or two from Michigan, that Al Washington and Greg Madison had been working with before. Well, now those guys are with Ohio State. They're recruiting at a high level, and they're going to take them. I think if that was a toss-up before, that Ohio State's trending up and then Michigan again is trending down, I don't see it anywhere across the board. And, if Michigan has good players, and we've said this before on the podcast, they're beating the teams that they should, but there is a huge, in my opinion, difference between what Ohio State has on their roster and what Michigan has right now. And that's not even debatable.
A walking, talking example of the difference is a guy named Zach Harrison.
Oh,
because he was being recruited heavily by Michigan, and we're all, you all saw him, folks watching out there, saw him bloom right in front of your eyes last year as the season went on. But here was a five-star, big-time five-star who maybe was even reticent about going to the school down the street, and Al Washington and Greg Madison were heavily on him, recruiting him for Michigan. And first Ohio State signs Zach Harrison, and then Ohio State signs the two coaches who were most involved in trying to recruit him from Michigan, Greg Madison and Al Washington Jr. And that's a great example of kind of what we're talking about. And then you look at Michigan last year without Greg Madison, without Al Washington Jr., a little bit of slippage there, in my opinion, on the coaching staff, even though the head coach, Jim Harbaugh, went out of his way several times at the Big Ten meetings to say maybe that was going to be his best staff ever. And you kind of go, wow. And the thing I didn't get into with Angelique, because we went on and on about a lot of stuff, but really the biggest difference in these teams the last so many years has been at the quarterback position, because Ohio State has had playmakers at the quarterback position going all the way back to Craig Krenzel back in 2001, and then moving forward, Craig Krenzel was a clutch player, especially when it came to the game. And I know they got beat in 2003, but they lost. That was a year of turmoil for Ohio State. But when you look at Braxton Miller and what he brought along, you look at Troy Smith, the way he beat Michigan, 3 years in a row as a starter, what you saw with J.T. Barrett, what you saw with Terrell Pryor, and what you saw last year with Justin Fields, for example. Those are just examples. The difference has been that's as stark a difference as you can point to in the series between a lacking on Michigan's part. And when they got Shea Patterson, they thought all their worries were over. It didn't work out to be that way.
I think that they've had two issues there. They've had a flawed plan about how they want to attack the quarterback position, and they've been in this vicious cycle of constantly searching for transfers to patch the void and not letting Jim Harbaugh is supposed to be this amazing quarterback whisperer, which I think all stems back to Andrew Luck, which how much work did he really have to do with a generational talent? I think some of this is really overblown for his ability to work with, develop, coach however you want to describe it, to get top flight quarterback play. And that's been missing throughout, this series. When you talk about the missed opportunities in 2016 and the guys that they had, there was no difference maker at quarterback for Michigan. And that hasn't ever changed in this series. And there have been times where there were opportunities for Michigan to make plays against Ohio State's defense. They couldn't. They didn't have guys capable of making the passes that they need to. So, I don't know that there's an easy solution for them, because they were so gung ho about going out and getting some of these top flight transfers, and that Harbaugh would be able to maximize their potential. Well, Ohio State had to do that one time, and yes, Justin Fields is a unique case, but if you want somebody who's actually earned that reputation for quarterback whispering and development, that's Ryan Day right now.
Yeah.
And so if you were talking about an area where, Michigan was trying to make headway, and I don't think you can win these high-profile elite games without a top-shelf leader, top-shelf talent at quarterback. It goes back to these conversations you and I have had before. When you're going to pick games, for me, I look at the coach, the quarterback, and where the game is played. And, 2 out of 3, Ohio State has those every single year, and every other year they're going to have all 3. So I just – it's a hard thing for me to wrap my mind around Michigan getting this fixed right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We look at Ryan Day, what he's done since he's been at Ohio State. He coached J.T. Barrett the first year with a backup named Dwayne Haskins Jr. finally. J.T. Barrett goes out of the Michigan game. Dwayne Haskins Jr. comes in, saves the day. And then, what Dwayne Haskins Jr. did the next year, to a really much different offense, maybe a lot of the same plays, but more plays from column A than column B, or column A or column R or column P. It was column P, which is passing. And then last year, getting back to a little bit more of a mix with Justin Fields, who is a mix between Dwayne Haskins Jr. and J.T. Barrett, and the way they were able to make that washing machine just clean like you wouldn't believe, on a record fashion. Yes, I mean that is definitely an advantage for Ohio State against almost everybody they're playing now. The way Ryan Day has gone about developing the quarterback position at Ohio State, you're exactly right. Hey, real quick, we're not going to waste people's time here, because right now nothing is going on with Ohio State as far as at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Clearly, they're staying in touch with their players. As you well know, the teleconference last week with Gene Smith pretty much was succinct about things, and Angelique and I talked about that, about how can you open up football until you open up the university, which has been your conjecture all along, because football is a microcosm of the university in terms of meetings held, of congregations held, of a difficulty when it comes to social distancing and having any kind of like semblance of normalcy until the all clear light goes on. How can you do that? But I'm just, and obviously they're staying in touch by Skype, Zoom, whatever their deal is with their players. They're trying to stay on them from a nutritional standpoint, from a workout standpoint and stuff. But have you picked up on any anecdotes over the last couple of weeks that have piqued your interest in how Ohio State's going about its business?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most interesting things about that Gene Smith call. I guess was that Friday. It feels like it was already weeks ago as time drags on here. But he kind of, I thought he was taking a proactive step to. This is going to sound silly. A proactive step to slow down the speculation about what's going to happen to the season, because you've seen other coaches around the country, other administrators, athletic directors, other people in the media speculating about which, format is going to be used, which model for the scheduling, what is going to happen with college football. Everybody knows the one fact that you'll do whatever it takes to have college football be played, because it would decimate the rest of the athletic department and do serious damage to universities as a whole if football is not played. But what I found most interesting about what Gene Smith said on Friday was that he's not spending a lot of times on the models right now. He's not spending a lot of time worrying about if the season needs to be played in January or, doing much other than getting to the return of play and what that looks like from there, because you have so much of this stuff speculating about it is reckless, and nobody knows for sure. You and I have said that every single week here on Mondays and Tuesday mornings, that you don't have enough information, and now it's been a month and you still don't. You have to get through this to a point where every other business, every other campus, every other state is open for, going out in public and having mass gatherings before you can have football. And maybe something will change between here and now. Gene Smith talked about the opportunity for, if they get testing and they can make sure that every member of a football team, which, 120 plus when you're counting the walk-ons and the staff, that's a lot of tests that you have to do every single week. So I had speculated on this and brought it up with you that I didn't think playing games without fans was realistic. And I think that's basically where Gene Smith is as well at this point. So he didn't give any predictions or takeaways projecting what's going to happen with the model. And I thought that was really the most important thing to take out of it, is that he's one of the most influential voices in college football and college athletics.
Yeah.
That's just it's obviously he's important in Columbus, but that's just a simple fact for his role in the national landscape. As somebody who's been on NCAA boards, picked college football playoff teams, he's done it all. And when he says something, I think that should have been a wake-up call to everybody. We're not there yet. We all want to know right away, when is football going to be played? You and I want to know that. The team wants to know that. Ryan Day wants to know that. But we can't. There's no point in saying that this is the model he prefers or wants, because it's going to be up to the doctors and the experts and state governments and the federal government. They're going to have to make the call for him. He's not really going to have a choice to say, I want to play Oregon, but I'm going to cancel the MAC games. If he could adopt your proposal on Sunday that you put up at Lettermen Row, I think he would probably be all for that. But none of us can really say definitively that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I was just bored, so I wrote something. That's what I did. And
you're always welcome to do that.
But the thing is, I was trying to show people, this would be the year, that big payoff where you get that 18 playoff at the end of the year, like everybody has been wanting. Hey, by the way, I really admire and applaud you for using the term champing at the bit instead of chomping at the bit earlier. I see I'm wearing, even on you, some of my great diction is wearing on you. Great use of the English language, the human language, the English language.
Hey, I keep my ears open and I try to learn from the best, man.
There you go, man. But yeah, the bottom line is, this is so unbelievable, because until you know the date, as Gene Smith pointed out, everything else is just like words on the wind, right?
Right. And that's and I get it. I wish that we could sit here and I could say, man, I heard that they are targeting June 1 and they think they can get out there and do workouts. They need 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and they're just debating over who gets what. Like, that's just not what's happening when they're having these daily conversations. And it's always, I think this is going to be a sobering realization in a lot of ways for not Gene Smith specifically, and certainly not for Ryan Day, but, just for instance, out of a hat, Mike Gundy, that you don't get to make up the rules. You're not more important than anybody else because you make $5 million to coach football.
Yeah.
I don't mean to just, pick on him in particular, but the things that he said are so far removed from what is actually going to happen. College football is not going to get to dictate itself when it gets to return. It is a hugely important business. College campuses need football. Communities like Columbus, Ohio need football, and everyone is going to do whatever they can to bring it back. But they're not going to be able to leapfrog past governors or the president of the United States or medical experts. They don't get to make that call.
Yeah.
If there's a limit on mass gatherings and you can't have more than 50, 100 people, football is automatically out. It'll be the first one done.
Yeah.
You get to watch some, maybe they'll play volleyball in front of no fans. Maybe the college golf season will return. And
well, as you and I talked about, football could be the last one to come back because it is the most congregational of any sport. And even
it probably would be.
Yeah. I mean, you got 100,000 fans. You've got like players running into each other on every play from, all points on the globe. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons why, football is more of a international or national scope as far as like even the players on your roster, where they come from, where they might be holding up during the pandemic. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why football would almost be the last to get the green light. And you're exactly right. Just to play it just because somebody's champing at the bit is not the reason, right?
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head too. Like, Ohio State in particular has a player in Hawaii and a player in Brooklyn, New York, or downtown. They're coast to coast, and then G Scott's up there in Seattle, which has been one of these hot spots. And you have all these issues. Are you going to try and bring college football back, but G Scott can't get back, can't get a flight? Gene Smith brought this up on Friday. He's going to have to drive across the country, or would he even be allowed to come back right then?
Yeah.
Or did he have to quarantine for 2? I mean, under the rules right now, if he could try to come back to Columbus, he would have to go into quarantine for 2 weeks. So there's no incentive for him to really do that. Nothing for him to do at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, as you said. But there are all these other issues that, I am guilty of this almost every day because I want college football back. As I've said every week on your show, it's my livelihood, and I love it as well. It's all those things to me. It's one of the most important things in my life. But for all those times that I sit there and thinking about what's it going to look like, am I optimistic today, more optimistic than I was yesterday? I have to sit back and think, well, I also have the wife and the daughter here, and you've got your family, and you've been babysitting Owen. Like, those things are more important. And
yeah,
that's a little bit of a flip in my mind. It's a switch that's been turned on that, like, yeah, I need football back, but other people have families too, and football is not going to trump all these other things. It just can't.
Yeah. Well, we promised not to talk about this last week, and we're talking about it. We're going to keep talking about it. You know what? You got to talk about it. You got to talk about it. I mean, it's what it is, and we'll get little snips and pieces of what Ohio State's doing to combat it and stuff. And we get to talk to Ryan Day again this week, I do believe, and we'll get some updates from him, et cetera, about how they're going about their business. But everyone's champing at the bit. I mean, everyone is, and it makes sense. And like I brought it with Angelique, you think it's bad now? Think about a month from now, if we're still in this self-quarantine situation. You talk about champing at the bit. Maybe it will be chomping at the bit at that point. I mean, people will be raring to go. I mean, it'll be like the Kentucky Derby, and the gates have been closed from behind on the 21 entrance, and now the charge is coming, but you're keeping them in the gates. I mean, it's really difficult with humans to keep them pinned up. This is just the human nature. But we'll see where it goes. But Boston, I appreciate you coming on with me again, and we'll keep bringing these podcasts to people. And I've got to hopefully have another really good special guest next week where we can kind of put things even more in perspective. And man, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, been watching a lot of Netflix and DirecTV, documentary things like that. I've only been to the store a couple of times. I look like somebody trying to rob the store when I go walking in. I haven't been afraid to wear a mask since this thing started, because why would you mess with this, man? I had some guy walk up to me the other day, walk up to me, like, "Hey, Tim," and I pushed him. I go, "No, man, get back." He goes, "What?" I said, 6 feet, brother, 6 feet. He goes, "Oh yeah," Meanwhile, he's walking. I'm just going. I'm praying for that guy, Yep. But he's a good guy. But they're all Ohio State fans. They all want to know when things are going to get back to normal. And I said, you're going to know when we know. When the green light goes on, everybody's going to know, right?
Right. And patience is the hardest thing, man.
There you go. Hey, but until we come back next week, ladies and gentlemen, this is Tim May on behalf of my good buddy Boston. You know him as Austin Ward with the Tim May Podcast. We'll see you then.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe below to get the latest videos from Lettermen Row.
We got Letterman Live, we've got the practice report, we got rapid reaction. Hey, and we got Buck IQ with Zach Bourne.
For sure. We got recruiting breakdowns with Berm. We got whatever you need. Ohio State football and Ohio State athletics, we've got you covered here at Lettermen Row.